that what Samavesha represents in terms of its both now, possession and immersion. So in other words, in order for the immersion into the Bhairava to be complete, immersion of individual consciousness into the universal consciousness, it is Samavesha that does the job. The Antahkarana here literally is that organ which obviously requires its limbs. It requires that where that information would come from. And that is provided here through that whole order of creation in quite a not dissimilar way how we could speak about physical organ with all the different limbs of the body and functions of the body. So the function of manas is therefore, let's use this with a pinch of salt, use the parenthesis in your notes, corrupts the Antahkarana. So manas corrupts the Antahkarana. What do you mean by that? It constantly draws the inner organ into the sphere of outer experience provided by the senses. It's as simple as that. So in other words, the propensity of the Antahkarana to be, as it were, if it's a valve, turned outward. So it's constantly turned outward. In other words, in yogic, Vedantic even terms, in Buddhist terms, everywhere it is agreed that Antahkarana is impure. Impure. It needs to be purified. And the impurity of Antahkarana here is checked by the fact that it is constantly drawn into the outer sphere, into the sphere of manifestation, into the sphere of the senses. So, as a thesis, in a nutshell, we could say that the job of yoga is to purify the inner organ and make sure that it functions as a valve that freely moves in opposite directions without constricting itself in any way and without constricting what otherwise is by design why we have the body and the senses, but also not at the expense of that what corrupts Antahkarana in its outer propensity, in the outer movement. So this, if we are to put it in a nutshell, what the goal of yoga here is to reclaim the inner organ for it to function more coherently, more cohesively, as it is a complex conglomerate of the four. Whether you adopt this just Samkhya perspective and instead of Chitti will have the Prakriti, it's the same. This applies equally. So, Antahkarana here, therefore, is often spoken as that point, that very important point of balance, that fulcrum, that literally where the propensity for outward experience is constantly driven by the insatiable, incessant activity of the senses, which are only eager to provide the information for which they are there as willing servants. But in doing so, they corrupt the lower mind. And in doing so, in turn, the whole Antahkarana, therefore, does not function to its full capacity. This is the understanding. So this internal dimension of yoga is literally to restore the full functioning to the inner organ, so it can partake in what the senses provide, in the organs of cognition for which the body is equipped, but not at the expense of losing the transcendental nature of the one who experiencing the soul. So this kind of like a leitmotif, the outline. And it's just happened that the two perhaps most effective and most powerful, tried and tested ways that have been formed in the given culture over millennia are known as the Samyama and Samavesha. So let's turn our attention to Samyama. So, as a Sanskrit term, it's composed of two syllables, two words, Samma and Yama. So it's come together, hold together, always together, combined, but in a certain way. So it's not just haphazardly somehow. No, it is coming together as with the great purpose. So this Samyama here represents a certain activity of Antahkarana. And just running ahead of ourselves and giving it as an example so as to make it more acute when we give the exposition on it. This principle, in fact, is observed in all highly intuitive work. All. Whenever there is some activity which is characterized by heightened intuition, an ability to get insight into where the rational mind fails, Samyama must be present. Okay? So what are the constituencies now here? And what it really represents in terms of how is it applied even? So for that we go to the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, because it gives us the most succinct, again, time-tested and accepted in all major schools, with slight variations, but let's not split the hairs, because it really agrees on this, that Samyama represents the last three limbs of yoga. So the classical yoga has 8 limbs, right? Starting with yama and yama, and so it goes. It culminates with the 3 limbs known as dharana, dhyana, samadhi, which are known for concentration, meditation, absorption or integration, respectively. Concentration here, that dharana represents, to be understood in more all-encompassing and more precise way than just English concentration. Concentration here is more accurately creating the possibility when attention narrows to a single object of contemplation. Do you sense the slight difference here? Slight subtlety? So, that what dharana here represents. Meditation, yes, it is spoken in terms of uninterrupted flow of awareness towards an object of meditation, whatever that happens to be. And finally, samadhi, integration, or absorption. So all three together are spoken of as Samyama. So in other words, in the first two padas of Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which consists of the 4 padas, which was briefly mentioned in our discourses earlier, the 2 padas, the 3rd and the 4th, are the most significant. The 3rd one is the most fascinating in the sense that it speaks about the development of the highest yoga, which entitled Vibhuti Pada, which deals with the development of the phenomenal powers, psychic powers, which we touched upon in our exchanges in one of the Q&As. What it means if we are to give it a kind of like a accessible, penetrating English, let's say, terms to decode what the Vibhuti Pada here really deals with. It's basically the ability of consciousness to go beyond any limitations. So that's what the 3rd pada deals with. And for that, of course, because it's a practical scripture, it deals with precise how-to, precise methodology, which here is utilizing the power represented by the 3 limbs of yoga: dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Concentration, uninterrupted flow, integration. What it does is, when there is enough, let's say, focal point of attention given to something at the expense of everything else, which creates the possibility of that uninterrupted flow, it results in samadhi, but not maybe how we mostly hear about samadhi, mostly kind of agree that samadhi is this absorbed yogi in state of meditation. But what it actually brings is a possibility of allowing the object of your meditation to reveal its essence. So the Patanjali Sutra literally says, so it results in the truth shining forth in all its essence. So in other words, the deeper dimension, let's say, the deeper significance of Samyama here is to get to what one sets one attention to. So for it to bring forth the hidden dimension of what otherwise continuously concealed by the propensity of the Antahkarana being pulled outward. In other words, Samyama is a methodology to give or regain the propensity, the inherent possibility inherent within the Antahkarana to transcend the very mind, transcend itself. Because Antahkarana, as an inner organ, can also be spoken of as the mind as a whole. The mind on the whole. So you see, the components are 4 to make it as an organ. But that organ is the mind. The generic term for it is the mind. But it consists or made of higher mind and the lower mind. Buddhists are very clear about that in their expositions. They constantly speak about it. So Samyama brings the possibility for the Antahkarana to bring forth that what it conceals, or rather concealed itself from, by that propensity for the constant outward movement. And this gives access, in turn, just we need to be attentive, this gives access to this hidden possibility that whatever we want to place our attention on, so it is not at the expense of losing, as it were, our wits, losing the essence of who we are by achieving what we want to achieve. So in other words, in this sense, even in terms of the esoteric dimension of this practice, its exoteric goal is not jeopardized, because in the history of yoga, it was very, very clearly within the tradition seeking or doing everything possible to be able to generate these Vibhutis. Let's just put a pause here. So this powers is what the yogis were after. And Samyama was that useful, tried and tested methodology to give the possibility to achieve results literally without moving from one place. Literally. There are these mythical accounts of how yogis achieve their objectives by simply drawing everything that they desire towards themselves. Of course, this invites some critical analysis, isn't that contradicts the very premise of yoga, which would be unpacked in the following pada, the final, the one on Kaivalya, where the highest achievement is considered to be Dharma Mega Samadhi, that very long word made out of the three, Dharma Mega Samadhi. It's like literally a cloud pouring down with virtues on the one who has freed himself from all worldly desires. It's the highest yoga. This is why Patanjali Yoga Sutras have posed a lot of problems for scholars in the field, precisely because it contradicts itself within the scope of its work. In the Vibhuti Pada, which is the largest in its volume of all the other padas, of all the four, so much attention is given, so much, let's say, how-to is given, only to point out that one is better off without it all. But why are these? I think it's healthy to reflect on that. It's healthy to reflect on that. We can come to some of this realization if this, one way or another, somehow round, spherical, then whichever direction we'll take, we're bound to converge somewhere. So maybe this, just maybe, I'm suggesting without insisting, that understanding that what yoga deals with here is the human psychology, and before one can overcome psychology, that repository of what makes us into a bound, right, fettered soul, and bound by what? By incessant desires to complete the sense of incompleteness. It's best to find shortcuts and immediate access through these psychic powers, so that there is again shortening that what otherwise would derail that potential hero in his journey, by him being gulped down by improperly functioning Antahkarana. And just like in the story, may I just relax your attention for a moment? You know, the boy, young man, runs into a sage in the forest. He's sitting there, suddenly overwhelmed with the sense of why, my God, falls on his knees and just like, this is it, I'm renouncing my life. I want to serve you, sir. I want to just, this is it. I want to realize my essence. And just keep chattering all that kind of like, keep bubbling there, how, The sage opens his eyes and says, "Can you bring me some water, please?" "Oh, yes, of course, sir." And the guy rushes out and just runs into the nearest, dominium, little outskirts of the village, and just like, "Hey," shouts, "there's a great sage in the forest, please, panting, I need some water. He asked me to bring it, hey, maid, bring the water," and this beautiful maiden comes out of the house. She's all graceful, she's all beautiful, she's all like this, and like this, and she gives him water. He drinks the water himself because he's panting, so he needs to quench his thirst. And then, just as he's about to fill in the container to take it to the forest, he sees how beautiful she is, immediately, smitten with desire, smitten with love, so asks, what's your name? At that moment, the father comes out and the mother comes out. It's a periphery, shortage of young men. He looks eligible. "Hey, come on, man, the lunch just cooked. What are you doing? Come." He thinks, "Well, but I've got to go," but the sight of the girl is irresistible. Smell of the lunch is also good. He goes in, he shares the meal, sits there, digests, already totally in love with the girl by that time. And sun's going down. The mother already setting the place for him to sleep. "Where are you going to go this, son? It's late, getting late. Sleep here, you'll go tomorrow." Bottom line, to make the story short, they got married, they got children. He's like, got some promotion, got some job. He's even accompanying the Raja somewhere on his royal hand. Okay? So he lost from the pack. They were chasing this wild boar, I don't know who, deer, and he just goes through the forest now trying to find, blows his horn, nobody hears, and suddenly he comes straight to the spot where the sage sits. His jaw drops and the cold sweat starts pouring down his forehead. He falls on his knees, prostrates there, starts crying, pulling his hair out, like, "My God," and she's like asking for forgiveness and this and that. And the sage barely opens his eyes and says, "Did you bring me water?" So, you see, this old story, right? Just also that shows the span of time, how in no time, how one perspective is this, another perspective is that. So perhaps there is something to why the third pada is so voluminous. Perhaps access is given to the realization of some hidden and not so hidden desires. One way or another, methodology is given. And without that methodology, the purification of Antahkarana is impossible, which is the most important thing. You see? So therefore, methodology is given to do the job so that in the fourth pada, it will be clearly then pointed out. Now all this is useless. All this is useless. Indeed, it's of no use, because if you are here for that, then hear what it is. So what is Samyama then? Samyama is this, what is composed of these three. This, what is exemplified by that concentration, meditation, and integration, absorption. And the Yoga Sutras are very unapologetic about whatever one places one's attention on, one will gain direct insight into the essence of it. So it will shine forth. So the true nature of object is always hidden, not known to us. We only know everything by bits and pieces, by fragments. Why? Because the functioning of the Antahkarana here, which in itself, the functioning of the manas as the composite of Antahkarana, infused by the sense of I, the sense of egoity, which in turn conceals the higher order of that what we have spoken about in terms of when Shiva, throws these kanchukas upon itself. Remember? Remember when we spoke about the kanchukas? That how each of its powers then are clocked using the same shaktis corresponding to these powers to conceal these otherwise universal qualities, to conceal the sense of infinity, to conceal the sense of fullness, sense of omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence. All this is concealed by its own powers. So the power, particularly here speaking of limiting its own fullness, that purnata, is what then considered to be giving rise to desire, raga. This is what gives a desire, because one's heart is filled with longing. This reverberates like an echo of that kanchuka. And that in itself reassures that vibration here left by that kanchuka sooner or later will create the possibility for that remembrance to begin to be cognized first and foremost through the discerning power of the intellect. Therefore, in Brahma Sutras, for example, the Vedantic, one of the authoritative Vedantic texts, it is said that Brahman, first and foremost, intuited through the power of buddhi. And for that, buddhi, intellect, is exalted. Even if it's happening in a flash of a lightning. Literally, how the sutras speak about that. So this, we could also see that some modulation within the functioning of Antahkarana is to create the possibility for the ahamkara and manas to be seen as subsidiary, subservient, and so that the power of intellect, of buddhi, to take over. So in other words, lower mind gives in or gives way to the higher mind. The previous order is reversed now. So that propensity for our mind constantly go into the sphere of experience, sensory sphere of experience to that. It is now has this capacity and driven by propensity and given quality inherent within the intellect to contemplate the essence of that what brings forth and rather allows the possibility for that mind to exist in the first place. And Samyama here is considered to be that very, very useful methodology. So, to take a pause, speaking about it now in practical terms, this could be said in plain English that people who do not meditate and don't have this access to this samyama, to that togetherness of concentration, meditation, and integration, it's as if the access to the high mind is blocked completely. Occasional flash of intuition there and there doesn't count for living from that place. Whereas all meditators, on the other hand, all meditators, if done skillfully, should acquire these skills and foster these skills, hone these skills. That's what Samyama here represents. So, for you to even try on your own, you can utilize this Samyama on anything you're seeking answer. Anything, any area of your life, absolutely any area of your life. You can try that. You can try yogic approach, applying Samyama So what it requires, all it requires is to have a degree of concentration on a particular object of your contemplation, which is then carried by the power of what is represented by meditation. And if the conditions are met, if there is enough of that funneling, and if the flow is indeed uninterrupted, there comes a moment when the true essence of whatever is the object of your attention begins to shine forth with all its essence in terms of what it represents. Now, to again break it down in plain English, any answer you're seeking will come to you not in the form of do's and don'ts, this and that. It will come in accessing that, what the intuition will provide here, as clear as the light. It's more important than rationally based decisions. Of course, it doesn't mean that we renounce or denounce rationally made decisions. We do that all the time. In making decisions in a group would not be possible unless it is given to the rationale of this or that, let's say, repercussions of this or that, let's say, approach applied. But when it comes to the insight into the essence of anything, it can only be gained through the higher mind taking over the lower mind. And what Samyama does here, it provides a useful methodology to achieve that. So, in other words, you can see here the two functioning of Samadhi in yogic traditions. Two functioning of Samadhi. Samadhi as an absolutist, from the absolutist point of view, as that most coveted state of absorption, and Samadhi as a necessarily being part of the three. In fact, you cannot separate Samadhi from these three. Even when someone speaks about, and this will become clearer hopefully, that someone like this or that saint constantly was falling into Samadhi, or she or he was known for often being found in Samadhi. Well, it is because it became completely and utterly habitual. There was enough Samyama, so the Samyama served the purpose. It simply did the job. When certain thing done as a practice, right, then it is no longer a practice, it's a play. Hitting the ball in ping pong or in tennis, right, in soccer, it requires a lot of practice. A lot of practice. And at some point, the moment of the practice, as it were, translates into pure play. And, for the fans of these games, it's nothing short of magic. Like real magic. And, like you watch these soccer moments, it's like defying gravity, defying this, defying laws of physics. Indeed, like defying laws of physics. Defying laws of physics. Like some of the most extraordinary shooters in the history were known for having the ability to defy the very physics of the way the bullet flies out of the gun. Because it always should fly in a straight line. Instead it does this. How do they do that? They were known for that. They will hit the target which is hidden by the column. The great shooters. It's recorded. So these fits are aplenty at the horizontal plane of life. If you are attentive enough, you will see Samyama is present there. Kobe playing basketball, it's a Samyama. There is no separation whatsoever. All this dharana Dhyana and Samadhi, what they represent, came into oneness so that the ball is in a basket. But it's not just in a basket. It's done in a dance that sets everyone losing their pants, because it's so beautiful, right? If any other fit, Maradona, Zico, Zinedine Zidane, it's a display of divine, skills. And of course, this translates in absolutely every sphere of life. Every sphere of life. People whose names we will never know. That Japanese craftsman who assembles complex, beautiful wooden piece of furniture without using one nail or a drop of glue. And then, if it's a vessel, it can contain water. These fits are because of the capacity to place your attention onto something at the expense of everything else. That's what Samyama is. Of course, at the horizontal plane of existence, it manifests with this freaks of creation. It manifests with these marvels of displaying, we call it magic, made tangible. But in terms of the psychology, this is perhaps one of the most proven methodology. So therefore it is spoken of as such. So this, with regard to the Samyama, do try that. So in other words, not just you meditate as usually, but in order for Samyama to be developed, obviously you have to be a skilled meditator. You have to be proficient in meditation, as simple as that. And then you try, bring that, and you will see that what is spoken now in theoretical terms, how it actually experienced by each and every one uniquely. Because this is where that much spoken about, much polemized about, precise point, at which point Samyama turns into that what allows the truth shine forth, what allows the essence of any object to truly reveal its essence. At what point? No text, no reference point. And this is where it gives us, let's say, that useful transition towards samavesha. Because just as with Samyama, with samavesha, when we speak about it as possession, there is no point that we can ascertain and say, that's the point when that what samavesha here represents takes over. When that what otherwise spoken of as mundane reality gets transfigured into an altered reality, transcendental reality.